Yo, we are here with Fury Warrior. We're going to talk about Fury Warrior in 11.1. I'm going to talk about the tier set, about the few changes that you will see on the talent tree, on the PvP tree, and obviously how does it feel playing it right now. The balancing is not done yet, so there is still a lot of things that can happen, will happen, and shall happen. And we are for sure in for a ride because they are still balancing. I think the recent balance changes were like 20% crushing blow, 20% raging blow, like all buffs to all abilities pretty much, like all important rotational abilities. All in all, I think Fury Warrior is in a better state than in 10.0, so previous patch. In 11.1, I think it will be more fun to play. I think the choices are a bit more nuanced, I would say. And the few changes that they made to the trees, so the class tree and the spec tree, I think they are good enough for now. Obviously, there's still a few things that I would like them to add a bit. For example, I think I kind of miss whirlwind do like good damage. Like since I do play a bit of classic, even cataclysm and whatever, I do believe like having some rotational abilities being still hurtful could be interesting. But now I understand whirlwind is like pretty much like a AoE Mythic Plus ability to keep up your buff to cleave pretty much. And it has no CD, it has no rage, so obviously you can spam it. So if it's too good, they could just be spamming it. That's not the idea. But let's talk about the tier set really quickly. The tier set is a winning streak tier set, as every single melee DPS is. Your abilities have a chance to start a winning streak, increasing the damage of Rampage by 2%, stacking up to 10 times. Like every winning streak tier set, it's always like a stackable thing. And then your big ability, which is Rampage, has a 15% chance to end your winning streak. So the stacking that is going to happen for Rampage, every single time you're going to use Rampage, there is a chance to end your winning streak. But when you gain a stack of winning streak, you have an even chance to either cause your next bloodthirst to deal 15% increased damage and have 25% increased chance to critical strike, or cause your next raging blow to deal 15% increased damage and generate 2 additional rage. That is something you can probably bake it into a weak aura, so you will most likely track it like that. Right now, I don't feel like the tooltips are telling you enough. Like the shining, that they could like pop it a bit whenever you're going to get the stack, so you could actually use it correctly. From my understanding, depending on what spec you're playing, I think the Bloodthirst one is better because you can basically like have a big blood buff if you're playing like the Reckless Abandon talent, and which is now very much worthwhile if you're thinking about like the special abilities that comes from Reckless Abandon. It's a tier set that it's most likely going to be worth to put. You're not going to skip the set, especially in PvE, but also in PvP. I think in PvP, it's half the damage. So if I'm going to damage this one, you see it's 7%, 12%, and 7% instead of like 15, 25, and 15. So, and even the stacking one, it's 10% instead of like 20% increased damage on Rampage. So, in PvP, I think it's still worth it because like a 10% increase in damage is way more stats that is needed to have that. Which pieces would I go? So again, I'm a PvPer, so which place I will go is maybe not the same as someone that is going to raid or Mythic Plus. I would say that right now I'm thinking about chest for sure because it's mastery haste. The hands are also very good, hands, haste, versatility, but then you have 3 pieces where you have to probably sacrifice a bit of something. I would go for the head, so you would get mastery crit, and I most likely will go for the shoulders to have haste crit. You will still have a bit of crit, but I prefer to have a bigger piece, which is the legs, to have more versatility or like something that compensates with the stats I'm going to go for example, mastery. All in all, I think it's quite interesting. Again, you have some special weapons here and there. It's not going to be overtaking PvP weapons. From my understanding, the proc is going to be nerfed in PvP, so by 75% or something like that. So I don't think it's going to be that good. But it is those are really beautiful weapons though. So if you can chase those weapons, why not? Talk about the talents really quickly. So they changed a few things, but not too many things. For example, you have dual specialization now on the left side of the tree instead of like in the middle, if I'm not mistaken. And it's 2 points, and it's dual wielding. Your damage is increased by 6%, but also your movement speed is going to be increased by 4%. I don't remember the movement speed if it was baked into that, but now it is baked into that. That's for sure. They changed obviously a few things. For example, here the Titan's Torment. I think it's is already live, maybe, or maybe it's just like a 11.1 change. I don't remember correctly. But while Avatar is active, Rampage Rage cost is reduced by 20, and Bloodthirst cooldown is reduced by 1.5, basically making it a 2-second cooldown pretty much. So you would kind of cast Bloodthirst every single GCD or every other GCD. Rampage being 20 rage less, I don't know how impactful that is. In PvP, most likely, I'm going to play with Berserker's Torment because Avatar is a big burst CD. So if you can have it while you're doing Recklessness, it's better. Also, it's longer duration if you pop everything together, pretty much. This is like good, but unfortunately, you cannot really reduce the CD of Avatar. So it's a 1.5 minute CD where your Rampage is going to be less costly. Sometimes you want to like stack it because you want to have like your slaughtering strikes anyway, so it's not like you're going to pop it every single time. Especially if you're playing the overwhelming rage talent, you will have more rage to actually like stack up a bit. Maybe the only advantage I can see is that you can actually do double rampage. If you have overwhelming rage and full rage bar, you could do double rampage, but I don't know how impactful that can be actually. So other than that, I think the Thunderous Wars had a nerf by 10%, I think. But I think the biggest change right now on the SPEC tree is the Reckless Abandon change. So now, Crushing Blow and Bloodbath are way bigger abilities, pretty much. Crushing Blow does 505k as a total damage, while your Raging Blow is 420k. But not only that, you also have a 25% chance to instantly reset its own cooldown, and its critical strikes deal 10% additional damage. So you could actually like chain it up. I think it's again depending on how you see it. I do believe Bloodbath is way better because I saw the target in the Bloodthirsty Craze dealing 488k physical damage, which is like a bit more than a Bloodthirst, but you have to also think about the second part, which is a very big part. It will cause a bleed, which is also extendable, and it's really, really interesting because you can buff it because of your Thunderous Words, pretty much, with Thunderous Roar, and you also have your Bloodborne. You have obviously your Odin's Fury, so you have a big bleed build that you can play with Reckless Abandon. The damage is really worthwhile, from my understanding, from my testing. Again, they could buff it, they could nerf it. I do believe that right now I am interested by Reckless Abandon. I think they should maybe re-implement the charge effect from Crushing Blow back in Shadowlands. They removed it in Dragonflight, if I'm not mistaken. Yes, they did remove it in Dragonflight, and they pretty much kept it how it is right now. I prefer it to be a charge, so you could actually have something extra, because I do feel like the damage itself, Crushing Blow, is good. The increased critical strike damage is also quite good, but the issue is that it competes way too hard with Bloodbath. It's kind of the same, and Bloodbath does more damage. So I would like to have a second thing about Crushing Blow that makes it really like worthwhile to have, which is, for example, a charge. One other thing is that you're losing I think one of the most interesting talents in general, it is like CD reduction, which is anger management. Every time you're going to spend rage, you're going to have CDR on recklessness, Blaze-Storm, and Ravager. But if you're playing Blaze-Storm, it's very good because you can also play Slayer, and then you have a lot of synergy with those two talents. But also, you have recklessness, and every single time you're going to do recklessness, you're going to get a mini avatar, which is going to help you with dealing increased damage, dealing increased pressure in PvP, but also I guess also in PvE. I think in PvE, on trash mobs, I think Mythic Plus, where you're always fighting, anger management is most likely going to be the better one. I think on boss fights, if you can swap, reckless abandon might be quite good, depending if you actually like clean the boss pretty fast. That I don't know. Again, Mythic Plus rating, I'm not like an expert, so you can tell me. But I think in PvP, you could have the choice between those two. But in PvE, I do believe anger management is still going to be the go-to, from my understanding again. And even in PvP, I think the Reckless Abandon is good, but if you cannot really have CDR on Recklessness and Bladestorm, it makes it for very long CDs for a spec that actually needs Recklessness to be enabled, in my opinion. You have Unbridled Ferocity, so you have some chances to sometimes get that Reckless Abandon for free, so you could have a Bloodbath or Crushing Blow. If I'm playing anger management, that is going to be gone, and I will be playing with Unhinged. That's for sure. Again, if I'm not playing Reckless Abandon, I would also maybe not play Odious Fury. I think there is not really a lot of value to that, and I might just play Onslaught, so I will have to sacrifice a few points, so I could have a good ability to deal damage, to generate rage, and also to get a lot of stacks on Slaughtering Strikes. So I think there's a lot of things that you can do and play around, which is interesting. But again, it really depends on your build and how you want to play it. So that's pretty much the explanation. About Slayer or Mountain Thane, the truth is Mountain Thane is interesting, but it has kind of the same effect. I wish it was different, but like Lightning Strikes is kind of the same as Slayer Dominance, except Slayer Dominance does more damage and also gives you a stacking buff to do more damage on your execute, which makes for bigger damage on execute. I think they just need to rework Mountain Thane. I think it's quite cool, but it should be stepping away from that extra passive damage, which is pretty much the same as in Slayer. So I don't know if they're going to ever do that. I think it's too similar to each other. I think it should be something else. Maybe not a proc like that. Maybe like give crazy damage to Thunderclap or whatever, or like make a big CD of Thunderclap. So instead of having like an 8-second CD or whatever CD it is for Thunderclap, it should be like maybe a 20-second CD, and it does like big thunder damage, for example. Like you could do something like that, but I think the Lightning Strikes build, like the Mountain Thane build, is too similar to Slayer, where you will always have and like go to the one that is probably balanced or tuned properly, which is most likely Slayer in PvP. I think Slayer is the one that is way more flexible as well. You have pummel while you're doing Bladestorm, which is very big. It doesn't make you stop pummeling, stop Bladestorm to actually be able to pummel. I think in general you have also a great 3 with execute to be very interesting as well. You have more mobility as well. So you have a lot of things that are like very very good on Slayer. So I'm very sorry for sneezing, but it is what it is. Sneezing. Anyways, so the PvP talents, you have a change, which is a good change. You get War Banner pretty much as a Fury Warrior. You didn't have War Banner as a Fury Warrior, so I'm not mistaken if I'm not saying that. You had no utility as a Fury Warrior compared to Arms. The utility from Arms was the minus 50% more strike effect in total, and your War Banner, for example. Now you get Berserker Roar, which is basically War Banner. So you're going to use your Anti-Fear, Sap, and Incapacitate, and you're going to reduce duration of the next crowd control effect within 10 seconds by 50% on in-group members within 40 yards. The 48 yards. But it is a nerfed version of War Banner, because it's only reduces the duration of the next crowd control. So I don't think it's going to be multiple ones. It's going to be only one. So that kind of sucks. So you could maybe literally bait it out. For example, you do a gouge as a rogue and then a big kidney shot. You could do that, for example. Yeah. So I wonder if it's going to be good or not. It looks good on paper, but it looks a worse version than Warbanner, except it's a 1-minute CD. And Warbanner was not a 1-minute CD. So I guess that compensates. The good thing is about Fury Warrior is that literally you can play that, which you didn't have the option whenever you were playing Fury Warrior. And you most likely have to sacrifice a point on the tree. I would maybe sacrifice Overwhelming Rage to get Berserker Shout, so I could then use Berserker Roar, which then will help with the CC portion. So now it becomes Berserker Roar, which I need to put it on the how it's called, on the bars. And you have still Berserker Rage, which is weird. So it's a bug, whatever. So now you have Berserker Roar, and then you see duration of the next crown control effect on you is reduced by 50%. And everyone like in your party is going to get it. So I guess it's like 1 per party member. I think it's not that bad. I think it's not that bad. I think it's like, maybe I'm over exaggerating the kind of nerf of Warbanner. But it's a buff for Fury Warrior regardless, because you have now something that is extra that you didn't have before. There's another thing that they have added, which is Dragon Charge. It's an interesting ability. I think people are like over exaggerating on the fact that it's going to be good. You are going to sacrifice your heroic leap. It's a 30-second CD, which is cool, but you're still sort of sacrificing heroic leap, and you can stop it whenever you want. If you're pressing B again, for example, you can stop it whenever you want, and you're going to knock people off. I think it's going to be a good BG talent. I wonder if you can actually use it while you have the flag. I thought it was not possible, so it would be an actual nerf, because you can actually heroic leap with the flag, but you cannot. I think you couldn't Dragon Charge. So I hope you can, because then you would just literally never use it in Warzone Gulch or Twin Peaks, for example. But it's interesting. It has a bit of damage to it. It's not going to be impressive. So a few suggestions I would make is that they kind of need to add even more PvP talents. I think people like wanting to have more choices. So yeah. Now let's test the damage a bit. I'm just going to strike, and you can see the damage on details. So pretty much, it's still a Fury Warrior. You still want to build until you have your rampage possible, and then you can just ramp up. You can even like go for a big burst, and you see I have now Reckless Abandon, and I have like a big dot now. Pretty much. And the damage is quite good, so I'm gonna show you with details, because again, I can talk however I want, but if I can show you it, I think it's better, right? And obviously you have your Blade Storm, you have like other capacities, and the damage, again, you shouldn't like take into account that it might be nerfed, it might be buffed. Crushing Blows doing 2 million crit on one hit is pretty good. People have around 10 million health right now. Again, I'm not fully geared up, so I guess it's around 13k. That's my estimate. And the damage is quite good. So you have your Bloodbath, for example, critting for 1.6 million, and you have another like part of Bloodbath, which is the dot damage, which is like doing 230k crit, which is okay for a dot, and it does tick fast, so it's good. You have your Execute still doing damage, Raging Blow still doing damage, the Thunderous Roar is still doing okay damage. You see Bloodthirst, while I was doing my burst rotation, I did only 3 Bloodthirst while I did 6 Bloodbaths. It feels like it's more fun to play Reckless Abandon, because Bloodbath is such a big ability, and kind of reminds me of Mist of Pandaria whenever you're going to activate Bloodbath. I think it was like every single ability that you did gave a bleed, like a stacking bleed on the enemy.
That kind of reminds me of that. I found it always cool to play, especially in PvP, like in BGs and whatnot. I found like a lot of utility with that. Crushing Blow does like again 5 strikes, and it does like literally 13% of your damage, so it's not bad. But in comparison, you see Blood Buff in total does more damage than your Crushing Blow. Now, again, maybe it's a bad comparison because I did 5 casts of Crushing Blow and only 6. I did 6 casts of Blood Buff and 5 casts of Crushing Blow, so it could maybe be higher if I did 6 casts on Crushing Blow. But in general, you see that the tier set is pretty much a you put on and forget kind of thing. You don't really play around that. You could have a weak aura about it, but it's going to be quite useless in general. Because it's going to be like something you're going to do regardless. It's not like you're going to for sure use your blood buff instead of Crushing Blow whenever you're getting buffed. No, you're going to use both. And if you're not using Reckless Abandon, then you just use whatever is like off CD pretty much, or whatever does the most damage in your rotation. So again, I'm going to show you again. Let's start with a Blade Storm, for example. And I'm going to start with a lot of damage. Dragon's Roar, Blood Buff, Rampage, Crushing Blow, Blood Buff, Crushing Blow, Rampage, Execute, Blood Buff. So it's quite fun. I like it. I like it. And the big explosions come from my weapon, by the way. So it's a weapon I bought from the mythic vendor, pretty much, like from the PTR. So it's interesting. The DPS is very high, but again, I don't know what's really high because it will depend on tuning. If 2 million DPS is nothing, then it is what it is. I wish that they actually squished the numbers, but I think it's fine. You'll have your blood buff still doing a lot of damage. You also see my blood buff, even like the dot damage, do more damage than my blood buff itself, which is quite interesting. Your Crushing Blow, if it doesn't crit on the right time, you see it does a lot less damage. And Execute doing still a lot of damage, like a 2-portion spell is always going to be quite good whenever you're going to do 1.4 million. If you're doing 1.4 million, then it becomes very, very interesting and very scary. Your Odin's Fury does still a lot of damage as well. And you have obviously the whole damage portion of Odin's Fury baked into details, so it's 10% for just one ability that you're going to press every 45 seconds. But anyways, that's pretty much the talk about Fury Warrior. Let's look about the tier set really quickly. I'll make a Arms Warrior video tomorrow. Or I will be making today, but I will be posting tomorrow. So if you are like interested, please do subscribe. Heroic, normal, Raid Finder. I think the mythic one is probably like the most beautiful one, obviously. If you can do Heroic, I think that's a quite good set, although it feels kind of Wrath of the Lich King, Walls of Draenor kind of. I don't know. It feels like something I already have seen. Then you have here the elite set, which is again I think the most beautiful one. So if you're doing like 1.8k, I think it's 1.8k you need, or 1.6k. I don't know, like that's like a rating I overshoot anyway, so I will get it regardless, pretty much. But I did see the set somewhere. It does look like something I have already seen. Like you see, it's kind of the same, right? It's kind of the same except the helm. So I don't know. I think they lacked a bit of imagination, but obviously, how much imagination can you have when you are basically doing tier sets every single season? So at one point it kind of stops. So yeah. Again, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Bye.